2 years ago, a games journalist and a friend of mine, Tamoor Hussain, who you may know from his work on GameSpot and Giant Bomb, released a video that made me feel ashamed. He asked the games industry why it didn't have more to say about what was happening in Palestine, despite being so vocal, so passionate, and so informed when it came to other crises of social justice. And I remember watching that video and thinking, I don't have a good answer to that question. Which is mad, by the way, because I'm British and my country has played an absolutely enormous role in this tragedy and continues to do so to this day. And when it comes to video games, well, this medium has an extremely uncomfortable history with its portrayal of the Middle East and the people who live there. How many massive video games have conflated Arabs with dangerous terrorists over the years? That has had an impact. Tamoor's video encouraged me and others working in and around video games to educate ourselves, to make charitable donations, and to be brave enough to say two things at once. First of all, no Israeli or Palestinian civilian deserves to suffer as they have. There is horror and misery on both sides of this, and it has to stop. And secondly, in no way discounting that previous statement, it's important to say that Israeli and Palestinian people do not live the same kind of lives. Israel is a nuclear power with the full backing of the United States of America, the United Kingdom, and many other Western states behind it. Palestine doesn't even control its own electricity or water supplies because Israel controls them. This is not a war between two military equals, it is an occupation and a siege, and it's been that way for a very, very long time. Given what's happening right now, I've been thinking a lot about Tamoor's video because over the years I have seen the games industry rally behind causes it believes are important, whether that's Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, or more recently, all of the money that was raised in support of Ukraine after Russia's invasion. There is solidarity here in this industry, but not for this, not for Palestine. Which is why we've asked Tamoor to use whatever platform we have here at People Make Games to speak to the industry once again, to ask people to care, to learn, and to do whatever they can to help. Later in the video, you'll also be hearing from Rami Ismail, a video game developer who's been advocating for Palestinians for many, many years, and perhaps most importantly of all, you'll also hear from Rashid Abu Aida, a game developer who lives in the West Bank and has first-hand experience of the conditions in Palestine.
Maybe you see like these red dots, laser dots that's coming from guns in games, but actually I see it on my body every night almost. When I pass a checkpoint, there is always an M16 or something like that pointed to your head.
Some of you may question the decision we've made in this video not to include voices which disagree with the idea that Palestine is being oppressed by Israel. Well, we think to do that in this moment, to present what's happening in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, as something that's up for debate, is a mistake, and a dangerous one. Israel has been the victim of a devastating attack that must be condemned in the strongest words possible, there's no denying that. But its response over the last few weeks has involved the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of innocent Palestinian civilians. And the response from the Western world, including my own government, has been to say Israel has the right to defend itself and stand idly by as an entire people are displaced and killed because of the actions of just one group. It's crucial to understand that this last month does not exist in isolation. The Palestinian people have no freedom. They exist only at the mercy of the Israeli state. And so we're choosing this moment for PMG to take a clear stance of its own. What's happening in Palestine is wrong. There is no possible justification for it. And we want to share the Palestinian perspective on what that really means. And with that being said, it's time to go over to Tamoor.
In May of 2021, I released a video titled A Message to the Video Game Industry, in which I talked about the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. My intention at that time was to raise awareness around the plight of Palestinians, particularly in communities that I knew would rally to defend innocent people, but felt that the situation might be too complicated for them, or that it just wasn't their place to speak up about it. My message at the time was simple. It's not that complicated. Innocent Palestinians are being killed at the hands of a ruthless government that has a complete disregard for their lives and is devoted to robbing them of their rights, displacing them, and killing them. A government that is dedicated to maintaining an apartheid state, while it also ethnically cleanses Palestine. Following the unjust killings of black people at the hands of law enforcement officers, a movement to stand up and speak out against these actions erupted around the world, and it inspired major companies, corporations, streamers, content creators, and others to use their platforms to speak up and raise awareness around the issue. When I asked for these people to speak up for Palestinians for the same reasons, the message was heard, and people did speak up. Sure, it wasn't to the same degree, but that wasn't the point. The point was to dispel the narrative around how complicated the Israel-Palestine issue is, so that good people could do the right thing. And what I saw filled me with hope that things had changed, that people now felt empowered to stand up for Palestine, that they understood the dynamics and the existence that the Palestinians lived in. 2 years later, I am asking people to break their silences and speak up for Palestinians once again. Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank have been killed in the thousands at the hands of the Israeli government, which is unleashing horrific violence on them, committing war crimes, and doing so with the approval of various governments around the world. This time, however, it's different. It is complicated in some ways. On October 7th, the military arm of Hamas attacked and killed 1,400 innocent Israeli citizens. These actions deserve the most fervent condemnation. The killing of civilians is abhorrent and repugnant. Along with the taking of lives of these innocents, these actions by Hamas have irreparably changed the lives of their friends, family, and their communities by putting upon them a trauma that can take a lifetime to address, if at all. It is disgusting. The Israeli government's response to this, however, has been to use the events as an opportunity to intensify the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and to do so in the name of self-defense. As I record this video, over 8,000 Palestinians have been killed, with over 3,000 of them being children. By the time you watch it, that number is going to be higher. The majority of these killings have been through bombing of Gaza, which has a population of 2 million people in a very small stretch of land. And some of these bombs have been white phosphorus, the use of which is a war crime. Israel's response amounts to collective punishment, which is also a war crime. It commits these crimes with impunity, knowing that it has the backing and support of America. Israel, along with media around the world, has very effectively dehumanized Palestinians by presenting them all as Hamas. Israel's defense minister outright said that Palestinians were, quote, animals, and this means that all Palestinians get treated as terrorists that have killed innocent people, and anyone who speaks up and supports Palestinians is thus a supporter of Hamas. The voices that spoke up for Palestinians in 2021 have become deafeningly silent again, as thousands are being killed, and the Israeli government is relying on this. The acts of October 7th, though horrific, are unfairly being used to stifle any sort of opposition to the disproportionate killing of innocents as retaliation. Israel has launched marketing campaigns, including adverts on YouTube videos and billboards in major cities that dissuade and discourage the people who developed an understanding of its horrifying actions against Palestinians in the past from seeking out further context around the military actions and its conflict now. It does this while escalating the violence against Palestinians to unimaginably brutal levels, bombing hospitals, killing journalists, controlling electricity, water and food, cutting off communication, and at the time of recording, bombing a refugee camp.
An unknown number of people are buried under the rubble. They were pulling out children.
Each new atrocity is accompanied with the justification that this is what it needs to do to defend itself from Hamas. But anyone that wants to see the truth can see this is not the case. Children are being killed in their thousands in a widespread ethnic cleansing campaign. Calls for a ceasefire are being ignored and outright discouraged by politicians around the world. This goes far beyond self-defense. This is the furthering of colonialist goals. And yet, when I see people in the video game industry turn a blind eye to what is happening or not use their platform to be vocal about the atrocities being committed against Palestinians, I feel compelled to speak to them, to help them understand a bit more, in the hope that they can once again find the courage to speak up. The extent of the subjugation of the Palestinians has repeatedly been deemed an apartheid state by groups such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. But nothing has changed. These are the conditions that Palestinians have existed under for generations, with no hope of anything different. I was asked to speak to the industry again by People Make Games, but at this point, I feel powerless. If the pictures, videos, and articles coming out of Gaza, the West Bank, and Palestine aren't enough to spur you into action, my words are surely not going to move the needle.
This young boy says he was stood here when 3 bombs landed, and he helped to move those who did not survive.
But even though there's nothing I can say that I haven't already said to you in my last plea for help, I can at least try and shine a light on the broader context. The horrific actions of October 7th did not happen in a vacuum. Palestinians have been repeatedly killed and displaced for years. And to try and talk about the impact of that, the lived experience of that in the most authentic way possible, I reached out to people with far more knowledge and experience than I have.
As you are all seeing on the social media, what's happening right now in Gaza is basically is a genocide. Like the Israeli is attacking everybody, civilians, homes, hospitals, like even schools. Everything is targeted. Even here in the West Bank, I live in the West Bank, I'm not in Gaza. In the past 2 weeks, like there's more than 100 civilian killed here in the West Bank. More than 1,000 person was taken to prison by Israelis. The situation is not, it's actually very brutal. This conflict is going like a snowball. It's getting bigger and bigger.
The West Bank is obviously completely separate from Gaza, right? Gaza is where Israel is attacking right now, and where a lot of the horror that we're seeing on the news is taking place. But the West Bank is actually a completely separate territory, separate government, separate authority from Gaza. And even though, you know, this has nothing to do with Hamas, the West Bank has for decades been a place where Israel and Israeli settlers or ultranationalists have stolen land, harassed people, attacked people, killed people, captured people, imprisoned people. And that's an ongoing thing. And under the fog of the war in Gaza, we're seeing increased aggression in the West Bank. You know, people getting murdered, ultranationalists just entering the territory and killing, burning land, burning houses, ensuring that people will leave out of fear so that they can claim that land in the West Bank. The other thing, I think, speaking to the cyclical nature of this, is, to me, it's terrifying that for somebody like Rashid, this is how many time you're seeing something like this in your life? Like,
it's never ending.
Right. I saw a story of kids who have learned to write their names on their limbs with Sharpie, not because somebody tells them to, but because they've seen what happens to a body when it gets hit by a bomb in a previous incident. And we're talking about 15-year-old kids who are now at their third invasion of Gaza, which is just staggering, right? That a 15-year-old kid would now be at the third time this is happening in their life, and would have learned to write their name on their arm so they can be easily identified if they get hit by an airstrike or a missile, hiding in a school or playing outside, or just, you know, trying to exist.
The operation of the apartheid state is clearest in the West Bank, where Palestinians are forced to use specific roads to get around, and are treated differently in all aspects of their lives, even in the way the law is applied to them.
It's defined as a land under occupation. For us as Palestinians, we see like all Palestine is a land under occupation. But even in the international law, it's controlled by the military, the Israeli military. So their target actually to make you feel that your life, every aspect of your life, is under their control. People maybe in different parts of the world, like when they wake up, they check the weather. When people wake up here in the West Bank, they check the roads, which road they should take. Because like there's checkpoints on every road. There is like a huge expansion of settlements, which is like an illegal entities for settlers. They just came to a random land and they take it, they build their homes, and they start expanding this land, and you cannot do anything. They are protected by the Israeli government itself, and they are also armed. For me, like even before this conflict, like settlers sometimes stone you with rocks when you cross a road that is near them. That was happening like last month with me. Like I was driving late at night, and they were making an ambush between the trees, and when I passed near them, they just thrown rocks, and one of them like hit my car actually. So basically they try to control every aspect of your life. You are not allowed to travel without their permission. You are not allowed even to go from one city to another city without their permission. They keep expanding their settlements. They do brutal attacks every night on Palestinians. They kidnap Palestinians. They kill. It's really very hard and very brutal environment. If this happened to anyone in a different place, like this is crazy. But this is our daily life.
When we talk about the West Bank and Israel, this is a straight implementation of an apartheid situation. When these ultranationalist settlers attack Palestinians, two Palestinians were recently killed going to a funeral. They were ambushed by settlers. Their car got shot at. The ambulance carrying the person they were burying got shot at, and a father and son were killed in just brutal violence with nowhere to go. Even in the system of justice, very explicitly, a Israeli crime is tried by a civilian court that takes very different rules and considerations and laws into account, and will usually acquit any aggressors, while Palestinians get tried in military court and are effectively jailed or taken away for sometimes years for just a crime of like looking aggressive. There's no real case of equality or fairness or justice in the West Bank. Gaza obviously sees endless more violence, but I think the West Bank is a very clear indicator of what Israeli peace looks like. The peace that exists right now is not a just peace. It is not an equal peace. It is something that would be condemned in the strongest words if it was happening to any country outside of here, but it doesn't, because the Palestinians over years in media, in education, have always been depicted as a threat to Israeli safety and security. And the story of what happens under Israeli peace to the Palestinians has been relatively underreported or completely underreported.
Israel's goal is to seize complete control of Palestine through cleansing and displacement, and this effort has been sustained for 70 plus years. The narrowed vision on the events of the last few weeks means that the violence perpetrated against Palestinians feels just, as self-defense. But the smokescreen allows the Israeli government to further its colonialist goals.
Every time that peace has been on the table, the increase in settlements or the Israeli refusal to stop creating settlements has been a major issue in getting negotiations to any place where peace could actually happen. Basically, all Palestinian land since the Six-Day War of 1967 was supposed to sort of be what the lands were going to be, but Israel has continuously used various legal and illegal mechanisms, or in Israel legal but internationally illegal methods, to dispossess Palestinians of their land, of their homes, of their rights.
There is a lot of maps that shows you the development of settlements in the West Bank. They are getting bigger and bigger, and they are making the West Bank like a separated entities controlled by the settlers actually.
What will happen is Israelis will make access to land very difficult. They will burn olive gardens. Ultranationalists will come in and terrorize the people until they flee. And at that point, they will declare the land uninhabited and claim it for themselves. They do that through various means. The Israeli army has been complicit in this by pretending that certain areas would be military bases and thus devoid of citizens. Under international military law, it is allowed to create military bases on occupied land, but not to use the land for any other purpose. And what would happen was these bases would get built, and then after the military would, as the military held the land, slowly the amount of citizens would increase, and at that point they would say, well, this is a civilian settlement, and we have to protect this as part of our duty towards the Israeli people. So through various very insidious and unfair means, these illegal settlements became military bases. And like Rashid was very vividly describing before, moving past these illegal settlements is dangerous for the Palestinian people that live in the West Bank, that aren't doing anything. They're, the stories that we see of people that are getting murdered by settlers, they're farmers. They have lived on that land for generations. They've been exploiting beautiful olive gardens, but because that land is fertile and could be used, the gardens get burned, and then when they protest, they get arrested for aggression, and they get thrown into jail for months until they are released, and they'll find their gardens burned down and their family, moving away because they can't afford to keep living there with no income. And at that point, ultranationalists will move in and take the house, take the land.
For me, one of the most disheartening things around the conflict long term is that the fight for freedom and rights that Palestinians have been undertaking for 70 plus years is delegitimized, and awareness around it is minimized. This is a problem that extends beyond political figures and into the very media we consume. As I've said before, the films, games, books, movies, and other forms of media that we consume present the Middle East as an area that is perpetually under conflict. We're never shown what places like Gaza, the West Bank, Iraq, Afghanistan, what they look like when they are thriving, not even in a historical context. So the assumption is that it just never has been anything more than a theatre of war, and thus the people there are terrorists, disposable, fodder, like in every piece of media they've seen. It's what allows politicians and media figures to strike down and dismiss any context that frames what's happening within the timeline of a history of violence from a powerful, highly funded, racist government.
The American government and the Western governments, all of Europe, they stand for Israel, and they don't care about Palestinian. There is an interest for them in Israel itself. Like this is political game. There is an old video for Joe Biden saying, like, if there is no Israel, we have to invent Israel.
Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
If you compare the Ukraine war to the Palestinian, like there is a huge difference between the actions that the NATO take for Ukraine to protect Ukrainians against the Palestinian. Like if you fight, like if you are from Ukraine and you fight Russians, you are a resistance. But if you are a Palestinian and you fight against Israel, you are a terrorist. This is saying about the governments, but not about the people, because people, when they see the actual facts on the ground, they change their perspective.
It's something that we're seeing right now very strongly, is that there's a massive difference in perspective of this conflict just based on age, right? Kids that are growing up using Instagram and TikTok and other social medias, they're watching Gazans, Palestinians, record videos, scared for their life, unsure if they're going to ever be able to post the video that they're recording. But they're recording them in English, and people are recognizing that as a cry for help. They're seeing sort of the reality behind the conflict. But throughout media, depiction of Arabs, of Muslims, of Palestinians has always been very negative, has always been very focused on, like, defeating us, killing us, or, the trope of sort of like the one good Arab, and then usually they'll betray you later in the game or movie anyway. So, this all sort of adds up, where effectively the world has sort of accepted the narrative that Israeli are just more human than Palestinians, and that is obviously really terrifying.
Another aspect of the Palestinian fight for freedom that strikes a particularly strong chord with me, and should with you too, is the artistic expression that comes from the region or aims to depict the history of Palestinians is stifled. Rashid developed a game called Layla and the Shadows of War, a game that follows a Palestinian family as it endures attacks and is based on real events. However, that game faced numerous gigantic hurdles in getting seen.
I made a very simple game without any political figures or symbols or anything like that. It's only telling the story of a little girl that lives in Gaza and suffered through the war in Gaza in 2014. And when I released that game, it was banned from the App Store, telling me that this game has a political statement and it's not allowed for you to publish this game.
Apple banned it on grounds that the game was political, and we actually had to pull up games where you play an Israeli missile that is published on the App Store to make the argument that there has not really been an objection to political content. And I think this speaks to a far larger issue, which is that because of the way media works, the default assumption for a Western person or an Israeli person is that they are a good person and that they have earned their right to humanity, that they have earned their right to be considered human, and that in the way media depicts Arabs, Muslims, Palestinians, we're usually depicted as a threat.
I remember growing up playing a game called Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm.
When you have to kill a person that shout like Allahu Akbar. Like imagine this, like you are a Muslim and you have to say Allahu Akbar in every rak'ah, in every prayer. And you have in the game actually you are killing someone, he's saying Allahu Akbar. Just like making a stereotype about like this word, like Allahu Akbar is something for a terrorist.
One of the biggest challenges that advocates for Palestine face, particularly in this industry, is impressing upon people that what they're seeing now is actually an everyday occurrence for Palestinians. While military campaigns like this one being undertaken right now are a lightning rod for attention and support, this often fades once the conflict leaves the news feeds. And even then, there needs to be a safe and clear set of circumstances before support can be shown, for fear of personal or professional retaliation. And in that situation, look what they have done is much easier for people to understand, digest, and form opinions on than look what they have been doing to us for years.
I don't think it is fair to say that this is a situation with a start and an end, the way a lot of people seem to be looking at this. But I think in 2021, when the aggression started, it was very easy to point at the Israeli sort of like incitement. That reached a certain level of virality and people stood up for that. This time, obviously, with the attacks of Hamas on the Israeli civilians, I think a lot of people are feeling that worry of being on the wrong side. And they're being very careful. And I think that is a type of privilege that is really easy to fall back into. It's like, you know what, this is too complicated. Yes, there's clearly a genocide happening, but maybe that's deserved somehow, you know? And I think because of that, a lot of people are a lot more careful. It's a lot more easy to be accused of anti-Semitism for opposing a genocide. It's a lot easier to be branded a Hamas supporter or a terrorist supporter, to face the suggestion that you're okay with the murder of civilians for siding against genocide, for standing against oppression and apartheid. And the fact that there's less than 15,000 or 20,000 Hamas members in Gaza means that, you know, we can starve, murder, genocide, and do war crimes against 2.2 million people. So I think it's the context of this conflict.
You have to take the full journey from like the 75 years, what's happening, why there is a 7 million Palestinians are like in refugee camps in other countries. They are not allowed to go back to Palestine. Why there is a daily killing in for Palestinians, like kids, journalists, civilians, why there is like more than 6,000 prisoners in Israeli prisons. Even if on Gaza, like it's in the last 16 years, it was like an under siege. It's like you never go out of Gaza. It's complete prison, and it's the most like the highest density of population in the world. Like all of their life aspects are controlled by Israeli. Their water, their electricity, their food, their medicine, everything is controlled by the Israeli. They are not allowed to do anything. So it's not this 2 weeks, not these 2 weeks. It's the big picture. What helps like people to understand the root cause of this.
One of the stories that I often have to reply to when I talk about Palestine on social media is this idea of the human shield, right? That Hamas uses human shields, and that is a war crime under the Geneva Convention, right? That is illegal. You're not allowed to use human shields. However, the fact that there is a human shield does not remove the obligation of the other party to avoid civilian casualties. And for some reason, that detail gets lost in this conversation. The idea that because Hamas would be using human shields, it is therefore okay to bomb entire buildings and houses and families. It's just not how international law works, right? But because these narratives get so ingrained in us, oh, it's not Israel's choice. The famous quote is, oh, well, we are forced to kill their children. Nobody's being forced to kill anybody. Right? There's no requirement of lethal action in the current situation in Israel and Palestine. That choice just gets made, and that choice gets made continuously for decades, day in, day out, against the Palestinian people. And that's why I think at the root of this is just the idea that Palestine deserves its freedom and Palestinians deserve to be treated as human beings.
So how do people that want to stand up for Palestinian right to self-determination break through the wall of misinformation, unfair justification, and decades of villainization? Particularly for people in video games who build themselves around specific brands and operate within specific lanes and face pushback when venturing outside of them into areas that are deemed political.
I mean, I think from my perspective, one really big part of this is just language. Like, words are incredibly powerful at shaping human understanding, and not just words, like media in general. The first thing that needs to happen is to just sort of like put these little cracks in the existing understanding people have of this entire conflict, which is why I think it's very important that we use the appropriate words for things that are happening. Like what is happening in Palestine has been, in Gaza at the moment, has been established to fit every criteria of genocide. Thus, we should call it a genocide. When we're talking about settlements, we should call them colonies. When we're talking about two-state solution or one-state solution, we should talk about, you know, the reality of apartheid that currently exists in Palestine. You know, we should use the things that apply to these and repeat those. The other thing I think that's really important is to support the creation of Palestinian-made media. You know, there is an enormous amount of Palestinian history that is just completely ignored over and over again. The Israeli independence in the Palestinian mind is known as the catastrophe, the Nakba, because it displaced over 700,000 Palestinians from their land in massive violence, in horrifying violence, in cleansings and ethnic cleansings. And, you know, how much media have we seen about this? This is one of the most horrifying things that has happened in the past, 100 years.
For his part, Rashid is still trying to tell the story of Palestinians through games, even today. His next project is focused on the Nakba, a heinous event that is often intentionally buried and left out of conversation, with the Israeli government going so far as to punish anyone who even mentions it.
The story that I'm taking, it's an actual story that a woman, she was running from her home, and she tried to take her baby with her. And after a few miles, she looked at her baby and she found that she's carrying the pillow instead of her baby, and she went crazy at that moment. So this is an actual story that happened in the Nakba. So it's mixing both the Palestine when it was Palestine before the Nakba and after the Nakba, through that woman, through that her own like tragedy.
Like the Nakba is full of both horrifying and beautiful stories, and I think a lot more of those deserve to be told.
I have this idea like years ago, and I started working on it. We're like struggling to find the funding, the good funding for this game. It's not that easy to do it.
And with that, yet another opportunity for people to learn about Palestine just sort of stays on hold.
We live in a world where the oppressed, marginalized, and subjugated have to beg for help, prove they're worth speaking up for, and show you why they, their families, and their friends are allowed to live. All the while, the oppressor, the one that holds the power, receives backing and approval for simply saying, "These are the bad guys." That's all it takes to slaughter thousands, bulldoze their homes, take their land and live on it, and establish colonies on them. There's a marketing and media machine in the side of Israel. The only opposition to that are the voices of people willing to say what they're doing is wrong. People like you and me. We can be browbeaten and bullied into silence, or choose not to get involved, and we can go on living our life safely. But for the people in Palestine, they can't do that. Our silence is their death. With every passing day, the number of Palestinians dwindles further. More than anything, they want their voices to be heard, for their stories to be told, and in the way they lived them.
Okay, if you, like me, have been left with the feeling that you need to do something, anything after watching that video, then great. If you're on YouTube already, that's why you're watching this video, you should see that we're running a fundraiser next to it for the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. More children have been killed in Gaza in just 3 weeks than the annual number of children killed in all conflicts around the world in all of 2022. Your money could really help if you can afford to give it. Tamor chose to decline a fee from People Make Games for producing this video, and so we're going to be donating £1,000 on his behalf to this very fundraiser, and then any ad revenue that this video generates is also going to be donated later down the line. Last year, when we made a video about the Ukrainian game developers who'd fled their country following its invasion, you raised almost $11,000 to help those affected. It would be incredible if you could do the same thing here once again for Palestinian children. Thank you so much for watching.